What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to show you how to use Blender in fast and efficient ways to create video content for whatever various project you may be working on. I'm going to give you 5 ideas and walk you through step by step how to achieve them. I originally came up with these ideas when researching content for my plugin Director 3D. If you didn't already know, I have a 3D music video plugin for Blender. I recently added a bunch of free content and upgrades to that plugin, and I wanted to use this video to break down some of the systems I created and show you how you can create those systems for yourself. Of course, you do not need the plugin to follow this tutorial, but if you are interested in it, the link will be down below. So let's hop into Blender and get started. All right, guys, so our first idea here is going to be creating a simple visualizer, specifically this ocean visualizer, which I showed in my plugin. I'm going to talk about how to make this because it is extremely simple to make just using basic shapes. So I'm going to click Shift A and add in a plane, and we're going to scale this up. Let's click Tab to go into edit mode, and we can right click on this plane and just subdivide it. If you come down here in the bottom left, you can open up this little subdivision panel, and let's give this something like 10 cuts. Now I'll click Tab to go back into object mode, and we're going to go over to the modifiers. If you guys didn't know, there's an amazing ocean modifier, which if you click on here, it's going to displace your plane. It has this sort of built-in array. You're going to see here resolution view versus render view. If I was to bump this up to something like 14, you can see it's a lot more detailed than it looks. There's also this time value, which you can see we can modify. So what I'm going to do is create a driver here to actually automatically animate this for me. So we can click under time, and I'm going to write in here hashtag frame divided by 30. So that'll create this nice slow sort of animation for us, and you guys can adjust the numbers there if you'd like. Come over here to the wave section, and we're going to bump this up to maybe like 2.2. Now, if you guys come down here to the spectrum section, I actually really like this because it allows you to create a bunch of different looks in one. For example, you can go with something like shallow water. And with that, we can go back up to the wave scale and just lower this a lot down. You can have like a nice calmer scene going on just from this modifier. Speaking of the look of the water, let's go down in the bottom left and change to our shader editor. And I'm going to create a new material here. So for our shader here, I'll give it a more blue color. Let's change to the shaded view, and we want to go darker here, so I'll just lower this down. Going to lower the roughness a little bit just to give it some more reflection. Now under transmission here, I'm going to put the weight up to 1, and that looks pretty good. Next, we need to bring in our background. If you guys haven't already enabled images as planes, go up to edit and preferences, come over to your add-ons over here and just search up images as planes. You should have this by default right here. Once you've done that, you can go up to file, import, and images as planes. And this will allow you to bring in any sky or image background that you want. The key here is being able to emit light from that image. So I've actually gathered a bunch of just nice cinematic sky background images. So I'm going to load those in. So we'll go to file, import, images as planes, and then we'll just load one of these in. Let's scale this up. And you're going to see by default, it's not going to look that nice, especially in the render view. We don't have any lights currently in the scene. So let's start off by clicking Shift A. I'm going to go down to the light section and we'll add in a sun. So let's go to the light properties down here, this little light bulb, and we're just going to bump up the strength. We can take our angle. You can mess around with that. You can give the sun a little bit of like orangish color if you want. You can even use the color picker here and just choose straight from the sky background. Next, we're going to want to select our background, and let's check out the shader editor for that. So first of all, we want this to be emitting light. So instead of it just being in the base color, we're going to open up the emission right here, and we're going to drag the color from the image texture into the color of the emission. And we can give this a strength of something like 1 or 2. Now, if we switch over to cycles, we'll go from Eevee over to cycles, and we'll go to rendered view. Now you can see there's actually light being emitted from that plane, as opposed to if there was no emission here. As you can see the difference. You guys can control how much light again with this slider. Now you can also come over to your camera settings here, and we can add a little bit of blur for the background. So we'll come over to depth of field here. We'll change around our distance. I like to just lower it all the way just to kind of see what's going on first. Let's go f-stop like 1.8. And then we're going to gradually start taking this distance and raising it back up. You can also do something like placing a cube in the center here. You can use that just to kind of track your camera. So we'll go depth of field, use the eyedropper. You can put this cube in focus. So yeah, as easy as that, we have a little visualizer all with animated water. You can of course animate the camera. You could do anything with the foreground here, like adding a boat or whatever. If you want to just keep it blank, I think this is a nice just animated 3D scene just for adding in a lyric video over top, which I'm going to show you in a bit in After Effects. I think it's best just to set everything up and then maybe just go and swap the image and see what works best for you. You see, I can just come in here, I can click G and then Z just to sort of adjust the horizon. And I can just find what works best. And with that bokeh, it's going to blur your horizon either way. But I think that looks pretty good. Again, it's just playing with your ocean modifier, background set to emission, and then a camera. Now, a lot of you may be saying, oh, that's a lot of work just for some basic lyric video, but doing it this way gives you the ability to create things in a more unique way. Maybe you want to add objects in the water that are actually relating to the music video in some sort of way. You can have them in the water and you can have the camera sort of float by. I think it's more important just to know how to be able to create these simple environments, and then you can let your creativity take over and you can add in whatever it is you want to add in. Now, to save some of your time, I'm just going to leave this playlist below. This is an After Effects lyric video tutorial playlist. There's a ton of different videos in here that'll show you a lot of different techniques in After Effects for adding your words over top, for syncing them with your lyrics. So yeah, if you guys want to build on this, create some sort of like text lyric videos, go ahead and check this out. Link will be down below. All right, guys, so for our second idea here, I want to talk about some character music visualizers. It doesn't require too much time. These are just some looping visualizers, but you can still get some really creative results out of them just from a few simple models, some few simple animation, like maybe wheels spinning, or maybe even just like a walking animation out of Mixamo. So I'm going to show you some visualizers here from Young Blue. We have this first one here, which is more of just like a stylistic characterization, not even a lot of animation, just some of the confetti, some stuff on the glasses, things that you could do easily with like the puppet tool in After Effects, but it's essentially just creating a nice stylistic render. Next up, we have this one where we just have a 3D design character, and then we have some Blender shader effects, like some scan lines, things that you can find tutorials on YouTube for very easily, but it's mainly built around just the character design. So I definitely think you can get into the character customization and honestly have a lot of fun doing that. For that, I recommend you pick up Daz 3D, and I've made a lot of videos on this because it is a free 3D software. You can get the Daz to Blender plugin, which makes transferring your characters you designed there into Blender extremely easy. And then once you've done that, you have freedom of customization, adding your camera, adding your lighting, adding your animation to be able to create a lot of the ideas like you're seeing here. For a lot of these props, like the chains, again, I've been trying to make this process easier. I have an entire chain preset where you can design this chain how you want. If you guys want a full length tutorial on any of these little visualizers here, let me know in the comments down below. I'm actually just going to quickly show you how to do something like this, which is extremely easy. We can start off by going over to Mixamo because we're going to need an animation of somebody walking. Very simple. I'm even going to skip the Daz phase and just bring in a character from Mixamo. If you guys want your own custom character, you design it in Daz first, export it out of Blender, and then you can just click upload character right here. So let's look up walking, and we'll just get a simple walking animation. We can make him walk in place and we'll make it look like he's moving in camera. So we'll give it some frames and then we'll click download. So back in Blender, I'm going to go ahead and import that animated model that we just downloaded. Now you'll notice here, you don't even have to pay attention to the character in something like this. They're just using lighting to give you the general idea, but not really focusing on the character in of itself. Create the platform for him to walk on first. So I'll go Shift A and create a plane. Go ahead and align this with the feet. And then we'll go to the object properties over here, and I can just scale this along the Y. Let's go ahead over to the shader editor. I'll create a new shader and we'll just make this sort of like a glossy black shape. So I'll just make it black and lower the roughness to get that reflection. Pretty similar to the original. Now here's the effects part, and there's so many different ways to do this. You can use something like Embergen. I also have an option within my plugin where I can just click draw fire. And then from there, you can click and grab this draw spline tool, go into the overhead view here. I'm going to check on draw on surface, and I can do something like this. So again, many options for any effects. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing here. I'm just showing you an example. This one is created with sprites and a GeoNode system. And just so my recording doesn't lag, I'm actually going to turn down the amount of the fire just to make this a bit easier. So we'll create our camera first, Shift A, and we'll add in a camera, place that camera in view, and then we're just going to animate the camera so that it's moving backwards on the Y-axis. So I'll click So let's switch to our timeline. At the very beginning here, we'll click to create a keyframe for the Y. We'll drag to the end, and I'm just going to drag back. If for any reason you need more frames for the walking animation, you can just select the armature here. We can come over to the graph editor, and then under modifiers on the right, you may need to click N on your keyboard to see this panel. Let's go ahead and just add a cycles modifier. So now it's just going to continuously repeat that walking animation. So let's go back to our timeline. And from here, I can just mess around with my settings, change around the lighting, do whatever I want to create this sort of look. Something like this, creating a white point light over top so it sort of catches with the fog as well as creates this sort of cinematic look over here. And just like that, we were able to do that in just a couple of minutes, make a really cool animation similar to the one that you saw there. And I don't want you guys to feel like you need the plugin to be able to do cool things. This is just a time saver. There's always ways to do everything that I'm showing you from scratch if you want. You just need to research them. But yeah, pretty cool and easy. And like I said, all those other examples show you that there's so much more you can do with just a character as your center stage. All right, guys, number 3 is to use a green screen and a tripod. And I'm going to show you the simplest method for taking a person like this on a green screen and a tripod. If you have any of those other conditions, if it's not a green screen, if it's not a tripod, you're going to have to do a lot more masking and tracking. Doing it this way is easy. I'm going to show you how to bring it into Blender and create your own 3D background. Step 1, we're going to want to key out the green screen. So for that, I'm just going to use a key light effect in Adobe After Effects. So I can place this right here. Just click on my green screen, and we're going to have to make some adjustments here. So let's change this from RGB to alpha, open up the screen matte section on the left, and then we can change around the clip white and clip black. You just want to get a silhouette. I want to get a silhouette like this. Let's put it back into RGB. You need to, like for the shoe right here, going to click Control D and we'll just create a little track mask just to fix that. And then on that track mask, we can just lower down the gain. All right, so that's looking good. Let's go ahead and pre-compose all of this. And then I'm just going to take another little mask here because we only need this part. So there we go. We have our masked out green screen footage. Let's bring this into Blender. I'm going to go to File, Export, add to render queue. And if you want, you can render this out as an image sequence. I'm just going to save some time and render this out as an MOV with transparent background. So I'll click on lossless here. We'll change the format to MOV. So QuickTime right here. We want to go channels RGB plus alpha to get that transparent background. And we'll click OK. Now we can render this out. And we'll hop right back into Blender. So to set this up in Blender, it's extremely easy. We're again going to use that images to planes import. So we'll go import images as planes. It's fine where I save that MOV and we'll import that in. Now we can scale this up. Let's go and rotate this. And there we go. Now, obviously, if you change the perspective, it's still a 2D image, but you now have full control over compositing your entire environment. So first off, let's open up the shader editor for this. If you want the exact lighting setup, you don't want this to react to the world lights, we can plug this into the emission and we'll give this a strength of 1. And now you'll see in rendered view, if you get rid of the base color, you can keep it like that, or you can put the base color back in there and mess around with any external lighting. It's up to you. For our background here, I'm going to open up Light Studio again from my plugin. It just saves some time. I have some lighting presets here, as well as this add cyclorama object and an add 3-point lighting setup. You can download a cyclorama object for free. This right here is just a constraint on 3 lights, so you can choose where you want the lights to be. That is all up to you. Or of course, I can go in here and create whatever background I want. I think a great recent example of this is this .com Nirvan Chief Keef. I think the 3D was done by Aiden Edits, and they have some really great use of this here where they do the exact same thing, just images as planes, and then you can build whatever it is you want around your subject. Very nice for mixing 2D with 3D, gives you more control than if you were trying to composite within After Effects because you have this full 3D control. You can pull the camera out like that to create some really cool stuff. If you want to check out this video, highly recommend you do. If you want some ideas for things you can do with the camera, some general ideas for what you can do with backgrounds. I'm just going to pull something quick. Let's grab like a forest, go and grab just a background image like we talked about in part 1. We'll add in the sky. And then we can add in our camera, Shift A camera. I think it's Control Numpad 0 by default to put it to your viewport. I have it in my Director 3 tools, Control Shift T, align camera to view. And that's honestly all you really need. At this point, you can just drag like this and you can have sort of your rendered preview here, and you can use this little viewport just to add in whatever lighting you want. You can play around with the emission strength on the original image just to get a blend of the artificial lighting as well as the lighting from the original. Now, obviously, there's some more tweaking you're going to have to do in terms of lighting, in terms of making sure everything aligns. I threw this all together pretty quick, but in terms of workflow, it's the exact same thing. And of course, the best part is you can have that full performance capture playing in there as a video. You can see because this image background plane is emitting light, you even get this nice glow around the edges of our subject. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool things you can do with this. With this, again, I threw this together in 5 seconds. We have an ugly ground plane. I would probably have to add shadows to the feet to make that blend better. Maybe just by putting some more grass around here. Throwing just a couple of 2D images with a 3D environment. Very nice and very easy. All right, guys, so our next idea is to create transitionary effects for your animations or for your editing projects. I had this idea when I saw this Drake and Lil Yachty Cole Bennett music video, the part where they zoom through his eye. I've seen this done in a lot of different music videos, either zooming through something specific, zooming into a car and seeing all the parts and sparks, etc. There's a lot of really cool things you can do just by taking a camera and moving it through an object. It's especially cool when you're able to transition out from the other end of that object. So I'm going to show you a basic little setup here in Blender for doing exactly that. We're going to start out just by creating a cylinder. So Shift A, cylinder, mesh cylinder. Once you have your cylinder, let's rotate this on the X and we're going to scale it something like this. And then we're going to go Object, Apply All Transformations just to lock this all in. Next, we need to actually make this a tunnel. So we'll click Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to go to the face select mode up here in the top left, and we're going to delete the 2 faces from the cylinder so that it's actually hollow. So now what I recommend you do is add some loop cuts. So you can click Control R and you can just use your scroll wheel and just mouse up, do something like this. So once we have this general shape here, we're going to actually distort it. So let's go over to our modifiers. And first, this is pretty low poly, so we can right click, we can shade it smooth. We can also add in like a subdivision surface just to give it some more polygons, bump that up to 2. Next, we can add a displace modifier. And with the displace modifier, it's very simple. Just click new texture here, and you can actually click this little slider over here to see the texture straight in the modifier bin, a lot easier than switching back and forth. So for the preset here, you guys can mess around and choose whatever you want in terms of your actual shape. I'm going to go with clouds, and I'll just bump up the size to something like that. So that's how you can get general shape of this like distorted tunnel. You can come back to your modifiers here, and you can also control strength from there as well. Cool thing about this is this works with any other shape. So for example, you could create like a torus. If you want to create like a looping animation, go mesh torus. It's the exact same thing. You scale it up, you get inside here, do the exact same process to displace it. The only difference is you can make a camera actually loop around in terms of pathing. But with just a simple cylinder, it's very easy. So we want to start off by creating a camera. So Shift A, add in a camera. I'm going to click G and then Y just to move this along the Y axis to put this at the beginning right here. Next, you can create a texture for this. And I'm not going to point you as to what to do with the texture. It's really up to you. In my example, I created this sort of like fleshy texture with veins and things like that. I also made it like a trippy variant of it. It's really whatever you want to do with it. Let's just make this sort of like reflective, glossy black. Next, what you can do is we can add in some lights. And the best way to do that is to click F7. That'll put you in this overhead view. And it's a lot easier if you go into wireframe, so you can actually see through the cylinder. Then you just add in your lights by clicking Shift A, light, and point light. And then again, G and then Y, just to be able to move this. Shift D to duplicate, and then G and then Y. And you can just keep repeating that to place the lights in your scene. So here's our lighting. If it's ever looking a little bit stretched or low poly, again, just go back up to your subdivision surface. That'll smooth this out. You can go into your light settings here, choose a color, do whatever it is you want with it. And then of course, F7 again, take our camera and we can animate it. Set your keyframes here, move for how long you want, take it along the Y, and just move it through. So we've created our keyframe for our camera. Now, if you want to create that transition, you just need to go to your render settings. Let's turn on, first of all, some of these things just to make it look nicer, like screen space reflections. And then we want to go to film and check on transparent. That way, when we render this, we can choose whatever we'd like to transition to and just place it as a layer underneath. Motion blur also looks very nice with this. Now, one last thing I'm going to show you with this process, and I think this makes it look a lot nicer, is to actually add an emitter object. And that'll allow you to have particles or any other sort of objects just sort of flying around and flying past the camera in this tunnel. So to do that, we're going to click Shift A again. I'm going to add in another plane, and we're going to name this plane emitter. Again, rotate this, and then scale it down. So that's all you really need. This is just the surface where the particles are going to come out of. Now we can go over to the particles tab down here, and we'll click this plus to create a new particle system. And if we click play, you can see what it's doing. We need to get rid of the gravity first. So let's come over to the field weight section down here, and we'll change gravity to 0. From here, all you really need to do is just change the settings to make the particles look how you want. So we can take the lifetime here, and let's put this to something like 250. You can also set the start frame. So instead of having this sort of delayed start to the particles, they can just already be going. So we'll put the start at -10. Now let's reduce the number here to something like 50. And then of course you can change around velocity, you can randomize, you can add rotation. There's tons of things you can go in here to fine tune this however you want and get any which way sort of animation for your particles. Now, if you want to control what the particles are looking like, we need to make an object for them. So again, you can use any sort of object. For the tunnel one, I used a torus and created this sort of blood cell look. If you want just a normal particle, you can just create something like an icosphere. Let's create a little shader for this. And I'm just going to go to the emission and put the strength to something like 10, just to have this sort of glowing particle. Choose a color for that. Then we'll go back to the emitter object in the top right. In the particle sections, we'll go down to render, and we're going to go to render as. Instead of halo, we're going to render as object. And then you can choose your object like this. And now you're going to see those red particles flying around in the tunnel. If those are a little bit too small, right here under render, we'll put this up to something like 0.5 instead of 0.05. We'll see what that looks like. Also very important, come over here to the render tab once more and make sure you uncheck show emitter. That way it'll make it so that the emitter plane isn't actually showing in the render. You can also do that in the viewport section. Just uncheck show emitter. That way you only have the particles in here. So yeah, that's a very simple setup, but just knowing how to do that, how to displace, how to create the camera motion, and then create a simple little particle system like that, that can help you with a ton of different transitional things that you're trying to do. And then of course you can get into the shader editor, the lighting, and do a bunch of fancy things if you really like. All right, guys, and our fifth idea is large scale environments. So I'm just going to show you some other cool videos I stumbled across just to give you some ideas while I'm speaking here. But essentially, we're going to talk about how to create some easy large scale environment renders. There's a great music video here, Archangel. See here, there's just a lot of environment shots, a lot of simple things that you guys can create, nothing too backbreaking. Create a bunch of these shots, put them together, and you get some really nice B-roll for your music video, or you can just stitch them all together to create an entire music video. There's a lot of amazing tutorials that can show you how to create every kind of environment out there. So I'm just going to give you a quick tip on making large scale environments fast, and that is by using billboarding. So again, we can use the images as planes add-on. And just to give you an example of this, I'm going to open up that forest generator once again. And again, I have a full tutorial if you want to learn how to make these sort of large scale environment generators using geonodes. So if you take a look at the forest generator, you'll notice all of these trees are actually 3D tree models. So whenever you change your perspective, you're going to see this tree in 3D. Well, if you're trying to make a large scale environment, you can actually get away with using 2D images and parenting to the camera so that they look 3D. This has been used in a lot of video games using sprite assets, things like Zelda Breath in the Wild, just to limit the size of things, make things a lot more fluid. So what I'm going to do is delete the trees out of this forest collection. And if you didn't know, I built this sort of procedural, toggle procedural control here. So if I wanted to make something like a huge forest, I could just use this cell size to make like this large scale environment here. And then all of these different assets are just going to be scattered across this environment. So I can zoom out here. I can go to view, put this at something like 5,000 so we can see this better. And now let's bring in some lightweight tree assets. So I'm going to go to File, Import, import images as planes. And I've actually saved some PNGs here just from Google Images. Once you use that images as planes, it's automatically going to remove the background for you. For example, if you take this image of a tree and we click Shift A and add in a camera, if I was to go in and animate this camera and get this sort of 3D perspective like this, you can see as we move, you can just tell it's a 2D image. So we can use this billboarding technique to actually make it so that the tree is always facing the camera. To do that, we're going to select the tree. I'm going to open up the constraints tab here, and I'm going to add a track to constraint. So we're going to select the camera as our object we're tracking to. Now you see wherever the camera moves, the tree will also face. We can do this with a larger scale environment as well. Let's bring back our forest, and this time we're going to take our image of a tree and just place it into the forest collection. You see now we're having the trees scattered across the forest, but they're just not in the right position. So we're going to go to Object with the tree selected, and we're going to go Apply All Transforms. So now we have all of these 2D trees across our scatter GeoNode setup. Because this is so lightweight, because we're just using these 2D images, we can actually go to the GeoNode, we can actually go to the modifier controls for the system here, and I can take the tree density and put this up to something like crazy, like 5,000, maybe even like 20,000. I'm also going to lower the tree minimal distance here, just so there's less space in between. And you can see now we just have a massive environment of trees. So now let's use that billboarding technique and create the camera animation again. And to do this, because this is built into a scatter system, we actually need to make all of these instances real. So we're going to select the forest. We're going to go up here to Object, Apply, and we're going to click Make Instances Real. So this is going to make 20,000 different image planes. Again, still very lightweight just because these are image planes. And you'll see all of them right here. So now we need to add that constraint. So we're going to select the first one up here. We're going to go to the constraint tab and we're going to add a track 2 constraint. We're going to select the camera as that track 2. I'm also going to change the track axis to Y. So now what I'm going to do is actually shift click and select all of these different trees except for the top one here. And then we're going to control and click the very top tree, the one that already has our constraint right here. Once we've done that, we can go up to Object, Constraints, and copy constraints to selected objects. So now no matter where I move this camera, the trees will always be front facing. So now we can come over to our camera. I'm going to go to the camera settings here and just increase the clip end just so we can see on a larger scale. And then we can go in and just animate this camera and change any perspective. The trees are still always going to be in place. So it's a pretty cool little technique to design some massive large scale details that are still very lightweight because they're just 2D images. Of course, I'm using a very low res picture of a tree here. You guys can mix and match trees. You can mess around with the lighting. You could even do this same trick with something like fog just to give things some more depth and make them a bit more atmospheric. And you're quickly able to see some of the cool things we can do with literally just image planes and a singular camera. If you guys want a more in-depth finished product tutorial on how to do something like this, I'll leave a link down below. That video talks about how to do this with a particle system instead of a geometry node system. I think that if you want to create some extremely massive scale things, this is definitely a very useful tip. So that's everything for this video, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. I made another video just like this where I talk about specific music videos for people like Lil Durk and Metro Boomin. If you want to see tutorials on those, a link will be down in the description along with everything else. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting, and I'll see you guys in the next one.